welcome to Manifestation Matters. You know how we talk about this connection between what we think and feel and how it actually impacts us physically and mentally?
Yes. Yeah.
So let's dive a little deeper into that today, okay?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So for those who are like, wait, what? Can you give me an example of that?
Sure. I mean, I think one of the most common ones is if
Yeah.
you're feeling really worried about something,
Yeah,
like maybe you're about to give a presentation,
yeah,
you'll notice that your palms start to get sweaty,
yeah,
or maybe your stomach feels tight.
yes.
And so that's your thought, right?
Yeah.
The worry is actually triggering a physical response in your body.
Yeah, totally. And then the opposite happens too, right? When you're thinking positive, happy thoughts, maybe picturing a fun vacation,
Yeah.
you feel more relaxed and at ease.
For sure.
It's like this constant loop between our minds and bodies.
It's pretty wild.
Think about it. Learning something new. I always go back to this example. Learning to tie your shoes.
Oh, yeah.
At first, it felt so clumsy. It did.
Every step, you had to think so hard about it.
Totally.
You had to look at it. You're really focused.
Yes.
And it felt really awkward.
Yeah. Your brain is actively telling your fingers what to do.
Right. And then with practice, it becomes like second nature.
Mhm.
You don't even think about it anymore. Your fingers just do it.
Right. It becomes automatic.
Exactly. And so that shift from that conscious effort to automatic,
Yes.
it doesn't just happen with physical stuff.
Right?
It happens with our thoughts and our feelings as well.
Yes.
And that's what we're going to kind of dig into today.
Okay.
How those ingrained thought patterns
Yes.
or, those emotional responses,
Yeah.
how they develop and how they affect us.
Yeah.
And most importantly, how we can become aware of them.
Yes.
Because once we're aware of it, then we can kind of help
Right.
shift that,
Yeah.
towards something more positive.
Right.
Yeah, and it's fascinating because, we can even trigger our stress response just by thought alone. Our brains, especially that front part of our brain, the thinking part, which is called the neocortex.
Yeah.
It's so powerful that just thinking about a problem can cause the release of stress hormones in the body.
So even just replaying a stressful event in our minds, that's actually creating a
Yeah.
chemical reaction in our bodies.
Yeah, that's the key. That just the thought can actually make us feel stressed.
Wow. Okay.
So then that leads to an interesting question. If our thoughts can make us feel stressed and unwell, can our thoughts also help us heal and feel well? And the research that's coming out in neuroscience and epigenetics suggests that the answer is yes.
That's huge. So we're saying that our thoughts can impact our overall health. This isn't just a fluffy idea.
Yeah, no,
Absolutely.
yeah, I'm with you. I think a good way to think about it is to think of a habit. And a habit is it's an automatic thoughts and behaviors and emotions. And we do them so often that they become unconscious. It's like when you get in your car and you instinctively know how to drive to work without even thinking about it.
Yeah, I get that.
Your body has learned the sequence better than your mind has.
Yeah, or your morning routine. Do you have to consciously think about pouring your coffee every morning or brushing your teeth?
Yeah.
It's just automatic.
It's all automatic.
Yeah.
And that same automaticity extends to our emotional responses. A lot of people wake up and they immediately start thinking about all their worries. And those worries are these well-worn pathways in their brain. And they're connected to certain memories or people or situations.
So they're not even starting their day yet.
Yeah.
And they're already going back to the past problems.
Exactly.
And it's almost like setting the tone for their whole day that way.
Right. Yeah, because each of those memories carries an emotional charge.
Right.
And emotions are often tied to past experiences. And so if you recall those negative memories, you can instantly trigger feelings of unhappiness or anxiety or frustration.
Yeah, and then that just kind of sets the tone for everything else.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It creates your state of being. If you start your day focused on the past and its problems, your whole state is rooted there.
Yeah.
And so that can lead to a predictable pattern where the familiar past tends to create a similar future.
Right, so if you're always thinking about the negative stuff and the past negative stuff,
Yes.
you're almost setting yourself up for the same thing to happen again.
And it becomes a cycle that just reinforces itself. If you believe your thoughts create your life, but you're constantly feeling negative emotions,
Yeah.
it becomes really hard to think beyond those feelings. And so your feelings almost dictate your thoughts. And you keep getting stuck in the past
Yeah.
and creating the same outcomes over and over again.
So it's like that broken record player.
Yeah.
Same song keeps playing.
Exactly.
All right.
And you might even find yourself habitually checking your phone first thing in the morning, scrolling through the same social media feeds, getting out of bed on the same side. These small repetitive actions, they all solidify your routine. You know, we often take the same route to work. We interact with the same people who tend to trigger the same emotional responses in us. It's like a program running in the background. And we lose a sense of conscious control.
Yeah. And then we want to change. And it's not like we can just like flip a switch.
No, and that's because these repeated cycles have become deeply ingrained as subconscious programs. In fact, by the time we reach about the age of 35, a large percentage of who we are is a memorized set of behaviors, emotional reactions, unconscious habits, beliefs, and perceptions. And it's all running on automatic, much like a computer operating system.
Right. So you might like consciously want to be healthier or happier, but your body, your subconscious is running like a different program.
Exactly.
Complete.
And so this is where practices like meditation can be so helpful. Because in order to make lasting changes, you often need to go beyond the analytical mind, which can actually be a barrier to your subconscious. So consistent meditation can help to shift your brainwave patterns. It can help to slow them down and potentially give you access to that deeper operating system where real change can begin to take root.
It's interesting how it often takes like a big event, like a crisis or an illness or like even a major loss, for people to feel like they need to change. Like something really big has to happen.
Yeah, and what we're saying is, why wait for the pain and suffering?
Yeah.
You know, we have the capacity to learn and evolve in a state of joy and inspiration.
I love that.
And, you know, there's a growing understanding of this potential.
Yeah, and we talk a lot, too, about how, like, past trauma can keep people kind of locked in this cycle. They just keep re-experiencing it.
Yes, and the reason that happens is because the stronger the emotional response is to an experience, the more attention your brain pays to what caused it. And so it creates a really vivid and long-lasting memory, and people get caught in a loop where they neurologically keep thinking within the framework of that past experience, and chemically they keep feeling the emotions associated with it.
So like it's almost like that event leaves like a really deep imprint, an emotional and mental imprint.
Exactly.
It's wild.
Yeah.
And we often hear people say, oh, I can't control my emotions. Like I'm just an emotional person.
Well, and what's being suggested is that if you allow that emotional reaction to persist for hours or days, it can actually develop into a mood. And if that mood continues for weeks or months, it can become a temperament. And if it lasts for years, it can solidify into a personality trait.
Wow.
Right?
So that's how these things can really become ingrained.
Exactly. And the key is learning to shorten the duration of those initial emotional reactions. So, you know, people often re-experience past trauma because the stress hormones that are linked to those emotions are signaling the brain to stay alert, to be ready in case it happens again.
To protect you.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's wild to think that, like, a lot of people probably spend a good majority of their lives in this, like,
in survival,
full stress survival mode.
Yes.
They're always anticipating, like, a negative outcome.
Right.
Yeah.
They're focusing on a potential negative future and emotionally preparing for it. And if that happens repeatedly, the body can start triggering anxiety or panic responses automatically without any conscious thought. It's become a program.
Wow.
Right. So like you ask someone, why are you this way? And they're like, well, this happened to me.
Right.
And they feel like they can't get past that. And biologically, strong emotions release a surge of energy in the body and brain. And so people can almost become accustomed to this emotional rush, even if it's negative.
Yeah.
You know, and so they might unconsciously use their problems to reinforce their sense of self because at least it's familiar.
Yeah, at least they know what that feels like.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like their comfort zone.
And the act of constantly remembering the event reinforces that emotional cycle.
Yeah.
Right. So every time you recall a past event with strong emotion, your brain and body can produce similar chemicals as if it were happening right now.
Oh, wow.
You're reactivating the same neural pathways and sending the same emotional signals throughout your body.
Yeah.
And your body, which is your unconscious mind, doesn't necessarily distinguish between the actual past event and the emotion you're creating by thought alone in the present.
Right. So your body thinks it's like actually reliving the same thing over and over again.
Exactly.
Wow.
Yeah.
And then those emotions influence your thoughts, which then creates more of those same emotions. So it's like
it's that loop.
This ongoing cycle.
Yes. A person's entire state of being becomes anchored in the past.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how do we get out of that?
Well, it's been said that the most challenging aspect of change is to consciously choose not to make the same choices you made yesterday. So in the moment that you decide to do something different, you might encounter feelings of discomfort, unfamiliarity, and uncertainty.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why is that so hard?
Because we've been repeatedly activating and strengthening those neural circuits, and they're just functioning almost automatically now. A thought triggers a whole sequence, but it's the emotion that follows that thought that really solidifies the pattern.
Right.
Like if you have a fearful thought, that could lead to anxiety, and your brain registers that.
Yeah.
And it might lead to more fear-based thoughts.
So it's that loop again.
That loop.
Your mind and body are so conditioned to be in that state.
Exactly. And so when someone tries to step outside of that loop and make a different choice, they may not feel those familiar emotions. The body has adapted to years of a particular feeling, and suddenly it's experiencing something unfamiliar. And it can actually crave the known, the predictable chemical state, even if those states are negative.
Yeah, and then your body starts to like give your mind thoughts like, oh, maybe tomorrow, or this is just who you are,
Right.
you know?
Exactly.
Like trying to pull you back.
And if you accept those thoughts as truth, then it will lead you back to the same choices and the same behaviors and ultimately the same experiences and emotions.
So it's like, okay, so the body's almost like an unconscious mind.
Yes.
It's conditioned to this emotional baseline.
Yes.
And so if we keep reinforcing it with those thoughts, it just becomes deeper and deeper.
And so when the opportunity to let go of that emotion arises, even if you consciously want to change, the body's ingrained conditioning can actually be stronger than the conscious desire.
Wow.
And so the body, which is meant to serve us, can become the dominant force.
Yeah.
And facing the unknown can feel so daunting that people would rather feel the familiarity of negative feelings like guilt or suffering.
Yeah, because the unknown is like scary.
It is.
You don't know what's going to happen.
Right.
So it feels safer to just stay where you are.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And this is where a powerful shift in perspective comes in. The best way to anticipate your future is to actively create it, not from what you know from the past, but based on the potential of the unknown.
I like that.
What new thoughts do you want to establish in your brain? What new ways of acting do you want to embody each day?
Okay, so let's talk about that because we talk about mental rehearsal.
Yes.
Right? Like closing your eyes, envisioning what you want.
Close your eyes and mentally practice the actions
Mm-hmm.
and the feelings associated with what you want. And if you can become fully present during that mental rehearsal, your brain can't tell the difference between what you're vividly imagining and what you're actually experiencing.
So it's like you're almost setting up your brain.
You're preparing it.
In line with this future that you want.
Yes. The brain begins to shift from simply recording past experiences to becoming a blueprint for the future. And with consistent mental rehearsal, that blueprint becomes more like a software program. And it can guide your actions and even your emotions to align with that desired future.
Okay, so that makes sense.
Yeah.
And it's been said that the most challenging part is like teaching your body emotionally how that's going to feel before it actually happens.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's almost like...
This flips the old idea of cause and effect.
Yeah.
You know, the old way of thinking is you wait for success in order to feel confident.
Yeah.
Or good health to feel vibrant. Or a loving relationship to feel cherished. But that's the old way of thinking. You're waiting for something outside of you to change how you feel inside.
Right. So you're saying like you should be feeling those emotions in advance.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And when you feel good internally, you're going to pay more attention to things that contribute to those feelings.
Yeah.
The idea here is that by cultivating feelings of abundance and worthiness, you'll begin to attract or generate those qualities in your life. So feeling empowered can lead you to take steps towards success. Feeling whole can support healing processes. Loving yourself and life can attract more loving experiences.
Oh, okay, so it's going from like this victim mentality to an empowered mentality.
Exactly. From saying, I am this way because of what happened to me, to recognizing that your own thoughts and feelings are actually shaping the outcomes in your life.
And it's like that shift in perspective.
It's a fundamental change in how you see yourself in relation to the world.
Right. Well, how do we actually start that? Like if we feel like we are stuck in that loop.
Right. Well, it begins with awareness, recognizing whether your habitual thoughts are shaping your experiences or whether your external environment is unconsciously dictating your thoughts. It's about becoming more conscious of that interplay.
Okay, and then what are some like practical steps to like start, like, you know, we talked about mental rehearsal.
Yes.
Is meditation.
Yeah, meditation is. Meditation's a great tool.
Okay.
Because if you don't have a clear vision for your future, then you'll likely be bound by the memories of your past. And your life will tend to follow predictable patterns. So, you know, if you wake up without a defined intention for the day and you immediately engage with the same people and environments, your external reality will continue to unconsciously shape your thoughts and feelings. And that's because every person and every place and thing and recurring experience has established neural connections in your brain. And they trigger associated emotions.
That's even people, you know, that you don't necessarily get along with. We can use them as a way to...
Yeah, we can use familiar figures, like a difficult boss, to reinforce our tendency to judge, or an old adversary, to fuel feelings of resentment.
So we're using the outside world to kind of like fuel those negative emotions.
Yeah, we unconsciously rely on the external world to evoke familiar feelings, even if they're negative.
Right, because it's familiar, so we know how to like feel it.
Exactly. Yeah, and so to break free from these patterns, you need to become more powerful than your external environment. And meditation can help you achieve that by intentionally disconnecting from the external stimuli. So by closing your eyes, reducing sensory input, and consciously directing your attention inward, you can begin to override those automatic environmental triggers.
Right, and then you become more aware of when your body is trying to pull you back.
Exactly. When your body starts to crave those predictable chemical states associated with past emotions, and you consciously turn your attention back to the present moment, you're essentially telling your body that you're no longer being dictated by it.
Wow. Okay, and you're like, I'm in control here.
Exactly. You are the one in control of your mind and body now. And your desire for change starts to become stronger than your ingrained programming.
And then through practice, that becomes more of like the normal.
It does. It becomes more familiar.
Yeah,
it's like training a pet with consistent repetition and clear direction. The body eventually adapts. And there can be a release of energy as you begin to break free from the hold of those past-based emotional patterns.
It's interesting because we also hear this idea that like, you don't have to believe every thought that pops in your head.
Yes. Yes, and that's because our complex frontal lobe gives us the capacity for higher level thinking. It's called metacognition.
Okay.
And that means that just because you have a thought, it doesn't automatically make it true or something that you have to act on, right? And considering the sheer volume of thoughts that we have each day, many of them were repetitive. But if you believe every single thought is dictating your reality, then significant change is unlikely. The same thought patterns lead to the same choices and behaviors and experiences and emotions.
Right. So it's really about becoming aware of this whole process.
How we think, how we act, how we feel.
And that's metacognition in action. The more conscious you are of these often unconscious states of mind and body, the less likely you are to just go through your day on autopilot. Thoughts won't just slip by unchallenged. It's about knowing yourself deeply. And meditation is a great tool for becoming familiar with your typical thoughts and behaviors and the emotions associated with your old patterns. You're essentially shedding the old self as you consciously create new thought patterns and you condition your body to a new emotional baseline.
I like that. It's like we have to clear out the old to make room for the new.
Exactly. And we often learn the most about ourselves when we're experiencing discomfort, because that's when our programs tend to surface.
Oh, interesting. Okay. So by consciously observing these programs during meditation, we become less likely to react impulsively in our lives, less rigid in our beliefs, and more aware of when we're reverting back to our old habits. And that's fundamental to change. Unlearning the old patterns before establishing new ones, breaking the habit of the old self before reinventing a new one. It involves weakening those old neural connections and encouraging new ones to form, desensitizing yourself to the old emotional triggers, and conditioning your body to a new way of being. It's like a process of deprogramming and reprogramming.
Okay, and so it's not enough to just have like an aha moment.
Right, having an aha moment is a good start, but if it doesn't translate into consistent action, it won't lead to lasting change.
You have to apply it.
You do.
Yeah.
And some people might use insights as a reason to feel limited, or maybe they start blaming external factors for why they are the way they are. True transformation requires taking that in and actively making different choices in your life. You know, you can't just remove a perceived negative external influence and expect everything to automatically shift. The inner work is essential.
Right, so it's like understanding all of this is about taking control of your life.
Yes.
Yeah.
Knowledge is power. And self-knowledge is self-empowerment.
I love that.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And it's about recognizing the difference between the negative emotions that are associated with stress and the positive emotions that are linked to well-being. Prolonged exposure to those stress hormones, even if they're triggered by our thoughts, can have really negative impacts on our health.
Right, so we're trying to shift to those positive emotions.
Exactly.
Where our bodies can thrive.
Yes.
Yep.
It's about moving from a state of reacting to survive to a state of consciously creating. Right. And so while those short-term stress responses are natural and they're necessary to keep us safe, remaining in a chronic state of stress, even if it's triggered by our thoughts, is detrimental because our bodies aren't designed to sustain that level of heightened arousal long-term. Stress hormones can actually affect gene expression and contribute to various health issues.
And as we said, if our thoughts can make us feel unwell, they can also help us to heal.
Exactly.
Okay.
The emotions that are tied to survival, like anger, fear, and guilt, are often fueled by stress hormones. And these can be considered altered states of consciousness. So we tend to remember those challenging events more vividly because in survival mode, it's advantageous to be highly aware and prepared.
Right.
When that survival response is activated, a single negative experience can sometimes overshadow many positive ones.